Every single time it rains on your house, somewhere between 600 and 900 gallons of clean, soft, completely free water rolls off your roof, down your gutters, and disappears straight into a storm drain. And most people have never once thought about where all of it actually goes. That number isn't an exaggeration. It's basic math. And once you see it, you'll understand why your grandparents' generation never let a single drop of that water go to waste, and why almost nobody today even thinks to catch it. Here's the actual math behind that number, and it's simpler than you'd expect. For every inch of rain that falls on 1 square foot of roof, you get about 0.6 of a gallon of water. The exact figure researchers use is 0.623 gallons per square foot per inch. Multiply that by the square footage of your roof, and multiply that by however many inches of rain you get, and you've got your answer. Take an average 1,500 square foot roof. A single 1-inch rainfall, which is a completely ordinary, unremarkable storm, puts somewhere around 750 gallons of water through your gutters. Over the course of a year, with a typical 30 to 40 inches of annual rainfall in most parts of the country, that same roof is capable of shedding somewhere between 20 and 30,000 gallons of water, all of it currently running straight into the street. A rain barrel system takes a small slice of that and puts it to work instead. The concept is almost embarrassingly simple. You divert your downspout into a sealed, food-grade barrel, usually 55 gallons, screened to keep out debris and mosquitoes, elevated slightly off the ground so gravity gives you enough pressure to run a hose off a spigot near the bottom. That's genuinely the entire system at its core. People have used some version of this for centuries, long before municipal water systems existed in most towns, because it was simply the obvious thing to do with water that was already falling on your roof for free. So why did this fall out of common practice? Partly, it's just modern convenience. Turning on a tap is easier than managing a barrel, so most people stopped bothering once city water became the default. But there's also a less talked about piece of this. Municipal water utilities make their revenue by selling you water, and every gallon you catch and use yourself is a gallon they don't get to bill you for. That's not some grand conspiracy, it's simple economics. But it does mean nobody in that system has much incentive to remind you that a huge percentage of your outdoor water use, which for most households runs somewhere around 40% of total summer water use just for lawns and gardens, could be coming from something currently running down your driveway for free.
Before you set anything up, there's one thing you actually need to check, and skipping this step is the one mistake that can cause real problems. Rainwater collection legality varies depending on where you live. Most states have no restrictions at all, and some genuinely offer rebates or tax incentives to encourage it. But a handful of states do regulate it. Colorado, for example, limits residential collection to 2 55-gallon barrels per household, and Utah requires you to register your system. This is a 5-minute search for your specific state before you buy or build anything, and it's worth doing it first rather than after you've already installed a barrel.
Here's how to actually set this up correctly, because there are a few details that separate a system that works well for years from one that turns into a mosquito-breeding mess by July. Start with the barrel itself. A food-grade, opaque plastic barrel is what you want, ideally one that previously held food products rather than chemicals. Opaque matters here specifically because a clear or translucent container lets sunlight in, and sunlight plus standing water is exactly the recipe for algae growth inside your barrel. Cut or use an existing opening in the lid and cover that opening with a fine mesh screen. The same fiberglass screen material used in window screens works perfectly. That single screen does 2 jobs at once. It filters out leaves and roof debris, and it physically blocks mosquitoes from getting in and laying eggs, which is the single biggest complaint people have about poorly built systems. Next, elevate the barrel on a sturdy platform, even just a foot or 2 off the ground. Water pressure from a barrel comes entirely from gravity, since there's no pump involved, so that small amount of elevation is what gives you enough force to actually fill a watering can or run a hose at a usable pressure. Position it directly under a downspout and use a downspout diverter, an inexpensive fitting that redirects water from your gutter into the barrel when it's not full, and automatically sends water back to the normal downspout path once the barrel fills up, so you never get overflow pooling around your foundation. One upgrade that genuinely matters if you want clean water for longer-term storage is a first flush diverter. The first few gallons of any rainfall wash the accumulated dust, bird droppings, and grime off your roof before the water even reaches your barrel. So a first flush diverter is a simple chamber that captures and holds back roughly the first 10 gallons of any given storm, letting only the cleaner water that follows continue into your barrel. It's an optional add-on, but it makes a real difference in water clarity and reduces how often you'll need to clean sediment out of the bottom of your barrel. Now, an important safety note that needs to be said clearly. Rainwater collected this way is genuinely excellent for outdoor use. Watering a garden, a lawn, washing a car, hosing down a patio, filling a kiddie pool, rainwater is naturally soft and free of the chlorine, fluoride, and dissolved minerals found in tap water, which plants and gardens generally prefer. What it is not, without additional filtration and treatment, is safe for drinking. Roof runoff picks up whatever's sitting on your shingles, dust, bird droppings, small amounts of roofing material. So unless you've added proper filtration, UV treatment, or are boiling it first, this water stays in the non-potable outdoor use category. Treat it exactly like an incredibly convenient garden hose that never runs up your water bill, not as a backup drinking source. Maintenance on this system is minimal, but skipping it entirely is how people end up disappointed. Clean the mesh screen after major storms so it doesn't clog with leaves. At the end of the growing season, before winter hits, disconnect the barrel from the downspout entirely. Water left sitting in fittings or hoses can freeze, expand, and crack the very parts you just installed. Once a season, it's worth doing a full cleanout too. A simple mix of an 1/8 cup of bleach in 5 gallons of water, scrubbed through the inside and rinsed thoroughly, keeps sediment and any early algae from building up before it becomes a real problem. Let's also talk about the roof itself, because not every roofing material behaves the same way once you start relying on it as a water source. Asphalt shingles, the most common roofing material in the country, work fine for garden and irrigation use, though they can shed tiny amounts of granule grit into your first flush of water, which is one more reason a first flush diverter earns its keep. Metal roofs are actually the gold standard for rainwater harvesting. They shed water fast, they don't absorb any of it the way shingles do, and they're generally considered the cleanest, highest yield surface you can collect from. If you've got a metal-roofed shed, garage, or barn on your property, that's genuinely your best candidate for a rain barrel setup, even if it's not attached to your main house. On the other end, avoid collecting runoff from a roof that's recently been treated with chemical moss killer or that has significant lead flashing, since those contaminants will end up in your water along with everything else. If one barrel isn't enough for what you're trying to do, the good news is this system was built to scale without much extra complexity. Multiple 55-gallon barrels can be linked together with a simple length of PVC pipe near the top, so that once the first barrel fills, the overflow automatically feeds into the next one in line, and the next, giving you hundreds of gallons of total storage without needing a single pump or any electronics. Some people run 5 or 6 linked barrels along one downspout and end up with enough stored capacity to get most of the stored water to last almost the way through an entire dry summer stretch without ever touching the hose bib. Think about what you're actually looking at here. A 55-gallon barrel, a length of mesh screen, and a diverter fitting run you somewhere between $50 and $150 total, depending on how elaborate you go, and connect to a resource that's already free, already falling directly onto your roof, and already running past your downspout every time it rains. A single full barrel alone can cover the water needs of roughly a 200-square-foot garden bed. Multiply a few barrels across a rainy season, and you're looking at real, measurable relief on your summer water bill for a system your own grandparents likely would have considered just common sense. So next time it rains, go stand at the bottom of your downspout for 30 seconds and actually watch how much water is pouring off your roof. That's not waste.
That's an entire growing season of free irrigation running straight past you into a storm drain. If this changed how you look at your gutters, subscribe, because there's a lot more of this quietly waiting to be picked back up.